Okay guys, quick walkthrough on using style sheets in InDesign. Because you're not dealing with a lot of content for Magma, you may or may not want to use them, but it's important for you to know how to use them as you move into, say, the next project, but also just something I want to make sure you have before you leave the class, because it'll be useful to you in other contexts whenever you're dealing with different levels of information. And particularly in a situation where you want to have a bit of visual hierarchy in place, information hierarchy, style sheets are handy. So if you remember reading in your type primer book about, say, there's a whole recipe section there where you were trying to break up the information in a way to make it clear for the reader, the person in the kitchen on the fly, what's my first level of read, what's my second level, etc. Okay, in something like the Magma Manchester stuff, again, you could argue that you want to have maybe this at a certain weight, maybe these are at a certain size and weight, and these could be a little smaller, or these could, how you break this information up as we've looked at in the examples. I mean, it's totally up to you, right? So you can go a lot of different ways with it. It can be really clean and very sort of organized, and it can be, broken up in other totally interesting ways. And I think given the fact that you're doing multiple iterations of each task, I think exploring both, a sort of, like I said, a sort of clean, more straightforward approach, and also one that sort of breaks up the information in interesting ways and pushes things a little bit visually, I think it's important to explore both directions, okay? But for our purposes here now, what I'm going to do is kind of show you, now this is information that's, I just found, okay? Maybe you say you work in-house for a museum or something. Maybe you work for the Cooper Hewitt, and you're putting maybe this is a little flyer you want to put out or something. And someone sends you, okay, here's our schedule for the fall events at the museum, for example. They would likely send you a document in Word, and you would have, you'd simply copy and paste that over from Word. Now, typically when you pull something in from Word, you're going to see here, if I go to my character, it's Times New Roman, it's set at 12 points of size and default line spacing, okay? It's not really formatted. Here it's been, maybe lightly formatted because they have it sort of roughly put into place here. The information, they have these little, dividing elements here, but there's no real, crafting to the type yet. It's all just pretty straightforward. It's broken up, and lines are broken up in a certain way, and so it's very loosely formatted. If I wanted to go in and apply, we're going to just use Helvetica because that's what we're using for the project. Now, granted, if I was actually going to design something like this, the Cooper Hewitt would have its own brand color palette and its own type palette, and we would want to design this thing full on. Okay, we're not going to go that route. We're just going to break up the information in ways that create a sense of hierarchy, and we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is decide, okay, what are my levels of information here? I have this sort of design culture now, and that's my series, for example. The Cooper Hewitt is the place, and then I have these speakers, where they're from, when it's happening, and a little blurb about each of them. Okay, so maybe I decide, okay, right off the top, I'm going to go into my character, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to turn this into Helvetica, and I'm going to make it regular, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and make this, maybe I'll go 8.5 on 12.5, for example, okay? Just to get a loose format in place, okay? I look at this after I do that and decide, okay, this is going on the smallish side, but for my purposes here, I like it. Granted, I'm on screen, so it's really hard to tell. You'd have to print and decide, hey, is 8.5 too small? You could decide, like, again, the Goldilocks thing, well, maybe 8.75 is better, and 8.75 on 12.75. For some reason with Helvetica, I tend to like my line spacing a little more open, just to let it breathe a little bit, because it is a slightly larger typeface, okay? So I have that loose thing in place. I'm going to have that be my baseline type style. So if I go under my character styles, if you don't see it, it's type character styles, okay? I'm going to click on a new style here, this little, new style icon, and I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to change that here to body copy. I'm going to name that body copy. My basic character formats will essentially be what I just brought in here. I'm going to make sure that goes to regular. I'm going to, the size that and line spacing that I already put there in there. Kerning, I might make, because it's going to be for my body copy, I'll turn that to metrics. Tracking, I'm not going to add any tracking. The case, I'm just going to leave that. You typically don't need to do anything, or you could put normal. If you wanted to change the case, you could. You wouldn't use small caps because there's no small caps for Helvetica. So I wouldn't mess with that. And the position, again, normal. You're not going to do anything here. Superscript and subscript, these are for things like fractions or copyright symbols and things like that, or any way in which anytime you want to superscript or subscript your type, which is something we will talk about, but not yet. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to do anything in my advanced character formats. I'm going to, character color, I might make sure the stroke is none. I'm just going to keep my type colored black. I'm not going to do anything else there, and I'm going to hit OK. So now I have a body copy style applied. Okay. First thing I might want to do there next is decide, okay, well, what do I want to do with these here? I might go in here. Now this has a style applied to it, remember. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm going to click on a new style. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put this under speakers, just so I have a sense of who they are. It's based on body copy. If you have this based on none, that's fine. You don't have to worry about it for this. I'm going to make that bold. You know what I might do? Actually, I might go to, I have another Helvetica here. I'm going to make that black. Okay, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Okay, maybe I'll make it a 10, and I'll open up the line spacing a little bit there. Because I'm going a little bit larger, I might see what that looks like in optical setting. It opens it up a little bit in terms of space. I'm not going to mess with anything else here. I can decide, do I want to track it out a little bit? I could do that later, but I'm going to leave it at that for now and see. Okay, I'm going to click off of there and see. All right, is that enough, of a difference? Maybe what I would start to do is go, okay, well, I'm going to select this person, make that the same style, select this person, make that the same style, etc. Okay, because then I'm starting to get a sense of what my page is going to look like. All right, I know that, okay, given, let's say maybe this is as wide as I can make my column, for example. Okay, I know that first thing I'm looking at is, okay, Eric, his name and company name is pretty short. Rebecca, her name's a little longer and her business name's a lot longer. Same with Michael here. So I got to be careful. If I go much larger, these are going to get really long, and so they're going to look kind of funky. So I got to be aware of what the content is, and that'll also determine how much room I have to move in terms of size and weight and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's say I have that where I like it. The first thing I'm going to do is, okay, brief overview. You can see obviously I have some basic hierarchy in place. I'm going to go to design culture now. And I'm doing this on the fly. You can plan ahead, and sketch and have a better idea. I'm going to go to character style. I'm going to name this now title. Okay. I'm not going to base it on body copy. I'll base it on none. Doesn't matter. Basic character formats. I'm going to make this should I go the Helvetica black or the bold? Let's see what this looks like bold once I go larger. Yeah, because my speakers are in the black weight, I'm going to go ahead and make that the same weight as that. I'm going to make that black. Make that, say 20 points, 22. All right, again, we're just doing this on the fly here. Leading, I'm not going to worry about because I'm only on one line, but let's say I did want to break it up into multiple lines eventually. Maybe I'll add a little bit of line spacing just in case. Do I want to mess with the tracking? Do I want to open it up a little bit? Again, if you have preview clicked here, you should be able to see kind of how it's going to affect that. I'm going to go to optical because it is for my title. It tightened it up a little bit. I'm not going to mess with anything else right now. Okay, and so that's my title. All right, now if I wanted to, do I want to work with that at? Again, if you come in here, you see Helvetica black, it's all set up as you just created it in that style. Maybe I want to put it on a few lines. I'm going to hit shift click, okay, and decide, does that work for me? I don't know. I mean, maybe I want to go even larger. So if I wanted to, I could go into my character styles. Now, if I make the change in here, it's going to make sure that it applies that style. I could go into my actual character palette and just sort of locally edit it as well. Which is fine too because I don't have multiple titles. I could do it either way, but I'm going to tweak it in my style here. Basic character formats. I'll make it a little bit larger. See how much room I have. Maybe I'll open up the line spacing a touch. That kind of thing. All right. Make sure too, because sometimes InDesign, it'll be weird on lines, like I'll select them all like this, and I'll look at my character palette. Okay, good. Sometimes you'll see that these will be blanked out. For some reason, there'll be something that you have to, when you import or when you bring type in, maybe the last line of something can get kind of weird. So I wish that I could tell you exactly why it is. Sometimes it just happens. So I always go in here and double click and make sure that these are all the same. And it looks like they are, which is good. And you can tell generally. Sometimes what you'll do is your eye will tell you, hey, these lines look, like one of them is a little more open. As I look here, it's not, which is good. So that's going to be a placeholder for now. Okay. Now I can go in and decide. Okay, now this section here, the Cooper Hewitt with a comma there. I'm going to take the liberty of putting that on the 2 lines. Okay. Do I want to add a style to this? What if I made it the same style as the speakers? Does that work? I don't know. I mean, I could do my own size and weight for this if I wanted to, but I'm going to go in here and add a little more space between those 2 lines, okay? And decide, okay, does that work for me? For now. Perhaps it does. We can leave that alone for now. But you see, now I've applied that style based on this. Okay, I could go in and modify this and make it its own style if I want to. Thing is, you don't want to have things that are similar but not the same. So you want to make sure consistency is there. If you make it just slightly larger and there isn't enough contrast between here and here, it starts to look a little bit muddy, a little bit soupy. Okay, so that's something to think about. If I'm looking at the way my information is broken up here, again, now I have a little bit more hierarchy. I've gone ahead and just sort of eyeballed some extra space between there. And again, I've done that locally in this character palette here, which is fine. The way my brain works, I go, okay, because this has 25 on 22, even though this is different size, I'll put 22 for my line spacing. It seems a little more consistent, okay? Again, go trust your eye at the end of the day. The way I look at this broken up, what I want to do here is I want to bring this time up. Maybe I'll put a little divider in here like that, okay? And again, you have the freedom to do this in your Magma layouts as well. If there's a little divider you want to add or something like that, you can do that. We talked about that on the list of subjects, the graphic design, typography, architecture, all that. Maybe you want to break that up using something other than a comma. You can do that. We talked about bullets, and I'll show you an example of what we're talking about. Okay, so now you can see that I've tweaked this. Do I want? I could, if I want to get designy, I could do the same thing here and take out that comma, add 1 space, and add a couple little things in there. Do I want to do that? At a certain point, you got to ask yourself, what gets? If I have too many of these things, does it work? Does it get too designy? Because I have them here, here, and then I have this one here. So let's say I'll just work with a comma for now, okay? But I have the main speaker. I'd like to set the time different, the day and time, to make it so it's not so blended in with this. How do I do that in a way that feels like it's different between these two, and but still feels unified? So I'll just eyeball it and go in, and I'm going to create a new style. And the reason I'm creating a style is because when I apply them to the other ones, if I make any edits, I don't have to make the edits to each one again. So if I went in here without style sheets and I made a change here, I'd have to make that, let's say I made this a little bit larger, for example. Okay. If I went to if it's 10 on 13, so you can see it's doing that thing here. Okay. So you can see where I selected that line and it did that. And I don't know why it does that. You can see it does it for these too. It's probably because there's a little space at the end. But if I go here and I click on my speakers, it should apply that. And see how that's not showing up as anything? I go to my speakers, I click that. Now when I go back to here, it shows it. Okay. So sometimes it's those little extra spaces that'll be the issue. Okay. So now those are all the same. If I wanted to go a little bit larger here, and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna make that just a touch bigger, then double click on my speakers, go to my character formats, I'm gonna make it 11 points, for example, so it stands out. Now I can see that everything that I applied that style to changed. So that one change I made by clicking a button here globally applied that to the document. Way easier when you have a lot of the same levels of information. Okay, and in looking at this, I think, okay, I actually like that a little bit better. I'll stick with that. Okay, which is cool. So that's a great way to, again, be much more efficient just right there. If I go to my logistics here, I'm going to add another style. I'm going to go to here, character style 1, double click. I'll name that date and time, for example. Let's say I want to go for, what do I want to do here? I don't love the oblique situation when it's between a this and this. I think it'll look too light. Okay, does bold oblique work? Or should I just try bold? Now the trick here, and we'll have to look at this, is that I'll leave it the same size. Okay, because if I'm going to make it bold, I'm setting it aside from here, but it's still at least the same size. If I start to go much bigger and it's bold, it's going to start to compete with this. So let's see what we did here and how that would work. Okay, I don't mind that actually. Okay, now you got to be careful because bold and black is only one step from each other. So sometimes that you can get in trouble. There will be a lack of contrast. But because I've gone smaller in size by a few points compared to this, I like it. It sets it apart from this information, but still feels like it's called out a little more. So now it feels like this and this are my first read, and then this, I can read the blurb after. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that to these. If I click and add the whole time, I go to my date and time, and my date and time. Okay, so that's starting to look like there's at least some sense of hierarchy in place. Okay, now maybe I decide here, maybe I'll go up a half a point here. If I click on my date and time, go to my character formats, I'm going to just go ahead and make that 9. I'll make it 13, and I can see I applied that to all of these. Do I want to? Maybe I like the line spacing. Yeah, a little more, slightly more open like that. Maybe that works well. Just to see the difference. Okay, just slight, but it actually does matter. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so now I know that those changes, that subtle change was made to all of these. Okay, so when I click on these, it's now 9 instead of that 8.5. Same line spacing we just did, right? So that's been applied to all of those. Another benefit rather than going into each line separately. Okay. You can then decide, okay, do I want to add some, maybe here's a line segment I can incorporate. This has nothing to do with style sheets. But let's say I want to break up my information a little bit. If I just click on this line tool, I make sure it doesn't have a fill color, that it has a stroke color, and it's going to be black in this case. I'm going to just rough in the idea of some lines, okay? Do I want them to be 1 point? That seems a little bit heavy. I could go into my stroke weight here and just rough these in place. So I'm going to add space, but for now I just want to see if they're necessary. Maybe I want to use them to break up each speaker. Okay. Okay. Or maybe I want to break up this line from this line, for example. Okay. You got to decide what's too much. And I start to think, okay, well, this needs help, but maybe I like that as a way to break up my information. If that's the case, I'm going to want to go in here and add some line spacing between to these styles here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my character styles. I'm going to go to the speaker, and I'm going to add some line spacing. Okay, between those, which again is helpful for us because again it's happening globally, and now I can go in and simply center this between the two blocks of information. A quick and easy way to do that. Well, maybe a way to fake it, as I'm zoomed in pretty tightly here. I'll take the stroke off of here. Okay. If you can click on this, or you can just hit the slash key on your keyboard. I'm going to make a little square here, or whatever shape, and I'm going to go from the the baseline to the top of the cap height here, roughly. Okay. Now I'm going to select this. While this is still selected, I'm going to go back to my black arrow. Holding Shift, I'm going to select this line. All right. And then I'm going to go to my alignment palette here. Okay, so you just want to go to your align. I think it's, I never remembered it, where it is on the where it is here on the menus. I never remember. I'll have to find that for you. Because I can't remember where it is in InDesign, in the palettes here. Let's see. I'll have to find that for you. Object and layout, align. Okay, there it is. Sorry. Window, object and layout, align, if you don't see it. And I'm just going to select, I'm going to have both of those selected. I'm going to use my align vertical center, and boom, okay. That will be there. Now, what I might do is actually, I mean, maybe you could do this on the front end, is if you get rid of these, you know, I'm creating extra steps here, which we shouldn't do. But now if I select these two items, one thing you can do sometimes, if you want to be able to select things without, you know, selecting other things, select, let's say, this type block, and go just hit on the Mac Command L. I assume it's Control L on the PC, and now you can just select those two items without any issue. Okay, and then I'll just go in here and I will hold both of those. With both of those selected, I will click and drag, and I'll hold Option to copy it and Shift to keep it in place. Okay. And that's eyeballed. That's close. I'll do the same thing. Option Shift, bring that down. It snaps into place. One more time. Option Shift, bring that down. Okay. And then let's see how that's working. All right, that's a little bit better. Okay. So then I'll go in here if I want to, because it doesn't matter. Those squares, they don't have anything on them. They're not going to show up in a print, but I'm just going to get rid of them anyway. So one thing again, because this is locked, if I click, oh wait a second here, what did I just do? There. If I click and select all these, click and drag to select them all, I can just hold Shift and click on one of the lines, on each line, and it'll get rid of, it'll only keep those selected, and then I'll just delete those. Okay. Now the only thing is, if you decide, hey, I want to add more space between these sections, you're going to have to go in and remeasure. So just be aware of that, okay? Let's say you want to add a block of black and you want to make this white, for example. Now, if I do that, I'm going to definitely want to space things out a little bit more. But I'm going to use my shape tool, and just for quick examples' sake, let's say I do this. Okay, I'm going to eyeball this because do I want to make it an actual square? Probably. If I did, I would go in and measure that out first and then deal with all my information. Since we're doing this on the fly, we'll keep it quick and easy. I have my shape here. I want to make sure that my fill is on top. I'll go to my swatches here, and I'll hit black. Okay. And I know that my type is below this now, and I also know that my type is locked. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Command. If I go to Object, Unlock All on Spread, I will unlock what I just locked. Okay, but the thing is, I know this is on the top. So if you can go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. Okay, and you can also now, since you have this selected, you can go to use your Type tool and select just that top part, and you can go in and just automatically change the color to white. Okay, again, this doesn't necessarily work for what I want it to do. I would take more time to customize this and get that set up first and then design everything around that. Okay. Again, once you have a shape also, you can, using it, your different arrows here. If I use my black arrow, it selects the whole shape. If I use my white arrow, I know that I can select just certain points on the shape, right? So one thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and back and lock that. And using my white arrow, I can, if I want to change the shape, I can do whatever I want now to this thing, okay? And customize that in any way I want, all right? So that's, you can bring in shapes. I can take this shape and make it larger and modify it and, have this drive my layout in totally different ways, and break up my page in a certain way and reverse information out of it and all of that, okay? That's totally up to you. in terms of how you use that. But for working on your current tasks, that's enough information. And again, style sheets you may or may not use because you don't have a lot of information, but it's something that is really good to know going forward, okay, especially as we move through the rest of the class. I wanted to show you guys, I talked about using other items to break up the information here. Again, if you're going to list your topics for Magma in a vertical fashion in a list, for example, you don't need anything. Some people want to add, instead of just the commas, they want to consider using bullets or slashes or anything like that. You can obviously go ahead and put your slashes in there. Again, if you do that, you want to apply them all throughout, and you want to make sure you have the same spacing between there. That could work. Maybe you only have one of them if you want to. If you do use bullets, because sometimes people like to use bullets, they can look really clunky if you're not careful. First thing you're going to do is give yourself a little bit of space on each side. And on a Mac, it's going to be option 8 that creates a bullet for you. Now, the nice thing is in Helvetica, they come in pretty decent. I mean, they're not like, sometimes bullets are just huge in a certain typeface. But one thing I'm going to do is still going to I'm going to apply some customization to it because it's typically too high. You can see that the baseline it's shifted up too much. Okay, and I might also want to go in and bring it down. If I'm working with 8.5 points here, maybe I make that 8.25 and bring that down, or maybe I break it down to 8. Okay, I just like to see the difference here. It's just a little bit smaller. It looks a little more crafted, just a little bit better. So now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go to my baseline shift. I'm going to go to minus, so let's start with 0.25, and that looks a little bit better. Maybe I go to minus 0.325. Okay, it's that level of detail that you want to consider. Once I get that to a place where I like it, and that, again, if I play with the kerning here, again, remember that depending on what letter this is and what letter this is, that's going to determine a lot of how much space you have to tweak. But I'm going to go ahead and just copy both spaces on either side and the bullet. I'm going to put them in here throughout the rest of my layout, or the rest of my list. And this is, again, if you're serious about this stuff, you're serious about design, if I'm at the end of a list, or the end of a row here, I don't need to have that. Okay. I'm going to, again, I'm only going to take those off if I know that I'm going to leave this as it is, okay? But if you're serious about this stuff, you go ahead and you do this, and then after that, then you go in and decide, okay, I need to kern here and here and here and here or whatever, okay? So that's just how you can use bullets. Typically what you want to do when you use bullets, make them a little bit smaller and then shift the baseline. That's all you need to worry about, okay? Any more questions, let me know. Thanks.